All right, let's get into it. We are heading deep, deep into the swamps of Florida today to chase down one of America's weirdest and frankly stinkiest legends, the skunk ape. And you might think you know the whole Bigfoot story, but trust me, Florida's version is a whole different animal.
It's funny. This idea of a big, hairy ape man is basically universal. It pops up everywhere, from the Himalayas with the Yeti to the forests of the Pacific Northwest. But the humid, murky swamps of the Everglades, well, they've cooked up their own special version, with a reputation that's pretty pungent. So, let's meet the star of the show, shall we? We're going into the Big Cypress National Preserve. Now, this place is over 700,000 acres of dense, swampy wilderness. I mean, it is the perfect hiding spot for a creature that really, really doesn't want to be found. Yep, that name isn't just for kicks. It's called a skunk ape for a very, very good reason. The absolutely overwhelming smell that people report when they see it. We're talking an odor described as a mix of wet dog, rotten eggs, moldy cheese, and just straight-up rotten garbage. It's the one detail nobody ever seems to forget.
And just to be super clear, this isn't just Bigfoot on vacation in Florida. The skunk ape has its own thing going on. It's usually reported as being a bit smaller, and get this, its footprints often have 3 or 4 toes, not the usual 5 like its northern cousin. But maybe the weirdest thing? People sometimes claim to see it up in the trees, which is not typical Bigfoot behavior at all.
Okay, so that's the creature. But the other half of this story, the human side, is just as fascinating. This isn't just a monster tale. It's about the people who have dedicated their entire lives to proving this thing is real, trekking into the swamp, looking for any clue they can find. You literally cannot talk about the skunk ape without talking about Dave Shealy. He's the guy, the godfather of skunk ape research. He claims he first saw one when he was just a kid, 10 years old, out hunting with his brother. And that one moment completely changed his life, kicking off this decades-long obsession to prove to the world that what he saw was real.
And this kind of search is not for the faint of heart. Just listen to this story from a researcher named Mike Aguilar. He's deep in the woods, all alone, and here's this massive crash followed by a deep, rumbling growl. It terrified him so much he just screamed out, "I'm leaving! I'm sorry!" But as he's backing away, he can hear it. Crunch, 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 following him through the brush. It even threw a stick at him. That's the kind of raw fear that drives these guys.
For the believers, the evidence is everywhere. You just have to know what you're looking for. They'll point out things that just don't feel natural. Fences that are bent down in a specific way, not just broken. Rocks stacked in these weird, deliberate patterns, or huge sticks just jammed into the ground at odd angles. To them, these aren't accidents of nature, they're signs of an intelligent animal marking its territory. Okay, but stories and strange signs in the woods can only get you so far, right? Now it's time to put the most famous pieces of actual proof on trial. Let's put this stuff under the microscope and see what's really there. And this is the big one. Back in 2000, Dave Shealy releases this grainy video. It shows a large, dark, two-legged figure striding through the swamp. It moves pretty fast, and then all of a sudden it just breaks into a dead sprint and vanishes into a patch of trees. Shealy's claim? It was running as fast as a deer through over a foot of water, a speed he says is totally impossible for a human. Right, but when you show that footage to experts, the story starts to wobble. An anthropologist described the creature's run as clumsy and awkward. A real animal that lives in that swamp would move with grace and power. This thing? Well, it doesn't. To a trained eye, it moves exactly like what it looks like, a person in a big, bulky suit who isn't a particularly good runner. Then, just a couple of months after Shealy's video, another bombshell drops. An anonymous letter shows up at the Sarasota Sheriff's Office. Inside are 2 photographs and a note from a woman who said a huge ape had been sneaking onto her porch at night to steal apples. She was terrified and thought it was an escaped orangutan. And these photos, oh man, they spark a huge debate. Believers look at them and see an animal that doesn't quite match any known ape, so proof of a new species. Skeptics look at the fur and say, hang on, that looks way too perfect, almost like a costume. Believers point to the massive shoulders and say that would be almost impossible to fake in a suit, but critics fire back saying a professional Hollywood-style costume could easily do it. And the anonymous source? Either she was genuinely scared of being mocked, or it's a perfect way for a hoaxer to hide. So, all right, if it's not a new, undiscovered ape, what in the world are people actually seeing out there? Let's dig into some of the more, let's say, grounded explanations for all these sightings. The number one argument you always hear for any Bigfoot sighting is just simple mistaken identity. You know the drill. Someone sees a black bear stand up on its hind legs for a second, their mind fills in the blanks, and bam, Bigfoot. Seems pretty reasonable, right?
Well, here's where that whole "it's just a bear" theory gets a little weird. Look at this data. Sure, Florida has a ton of bears and a ton of sightings. That lines up, but then you look at Ohio, over 300 sightings and less than 100 bears in the entire state. And then there's Illinois, over 300 sightings and a grand total of 0 resident bears. So whatever people are seeing in Illinois, it's definitely not a bear.
So this leads us to a really interesting and honestly surprisingly believable theory. What if the skunk ape isn't some undiscovered native creature at all? What if it's a known primate that's just not where it's supposed to be?
And this idea actually has some serious legs to stand on, especially in Florida. The state is packed with primate breeding centers and sanctuaries that house thousands of animals, from smaller macaques all the way up to chimps and orangutans. And here's the kicker. Back in 1992, when Hurricane Andrew ripped through the state, there were widespread reports of animals escaping from facilities that got destroyed.
And listen, this isn't just some wild theory. A public affairs officer for the Big Cypress National Preserve, the very heart of skunk ape country, has gone on record confirming that he, personally, has seen escaped primates in the park on multiple occasions. All of a sudden, someone seeing a big, strange ape in the swamp doesn't sound so crazy anymore, does it? So whether it's a new species, a guy in a gorilla suit, or an escaped chimp, the legend itself has this incredible staying power. So maybe we should ask a different question entirely. Why is this myth so powerful? Why do so many of us want to believe?
I mean, just look at this number. Florida is number 3, the third highest state in the entire U.S. for reported Bigfoot-type sightings. This isn't just some quirky local folktale. It is a widespread belief system that's woven into the very fabric of the state. And maybe that's really what this is all about. In our modern world, where it feels like every inch of the globe has been mapped and cataloged, legends like this offer a little bit of magic, a sense of wonder. They're a rebellion against the idea that there are no mysteries left to solve. I love this quote from a folklore expert. It just nails it. Believing in something like the skunk ape is a way of holding on to that mystery, of refusing to let the modern world take away that last little piece of the great unknown.
So in the end, that's the question we're left with. Is the skunk ape a real flesh and blood creature hiding out in the Everglades? Or is it something we've created, a reflection of our own deep-seated need for there to be something more, something wild and unknown, still lurking just beyond the edge of the map? For now, the answer is still out there.